Welcome to the Embodiment Conference. This channel, Trauma and Social Change, it's absolutely the moment for that, isn't it? I'm Steve Hoskinson. I'm the founder of Organic Intelligence. I've been teaching in this area of trauma, embodiment, and social change for about 25 years. It's an honor, really, for us to be sponsoring this channel where we're going to hear a multiplicity of voice, all unique contributors to our collective understanding of how to move from trauma and support then social change. Our unique voice in organic intelligence has something to do with a koan that I'd like to present to you, which is trauma means unintegrated resource. And that's a koan, and if you'd like and are feeling intrigued about that riddle, then tune in to the post-trauma system development course that we're offering here. The coupon code that'll get you half off on that is ENJOY. Now, enjoy this next presentation, and we'll look forward to another meaningful time as we explore these topics, trauma and social change. Enjoy.
All right, welcome back, everyone. It's now my privilege to introduce to you Soma Miller and his talk, Transforming Our Pain into Purpose. Soma is an embodied men's coach and founder of The Essential Man, an organization aimed at guiding men to live, love, and lead in service of a better world. He is deeply dedicated to building a new culture of man where the age of the lone wolf is over. His work encompasses nature-based mentoring, yogic and mindfulness practice, breathwork, reparenting, authentic relating, shadow work, and internal parts dialogue to support men in becoming emotionally whole and integrated versions of themselves. And Soma, I just would like to thank you on a personal note. I love what you're doing, and I'm looking forward to what you teach us in this session.
Thank you. It's good to be here. Thank you to those that had the courage to jump on and show their video. Very cool. I like the interactivity, so always welcome. I don't know exactly where I'm going to go on this discussion. I've got my ideas, but yeah, I really want this to be a conversation that hopefully we can all have. And this specific topic related to trauma and social change. I don't actually know how I ended up on this particular panel of the embodiment conference, but I'm glad that I did, because though I don't work directly and specifically with men around trauma, it seems to be something that is coming up more. I think collectively we're all seeking answers, and I think trauma in particular is something that a lot of us have avoided really looking at, and a lot of the work that I do with men is specifically focused on looking at the places inside ourselves that we don't tend to look, the places that we avoid. And so I want to start my talk really touching on actually what came up in that little intro video by the sponsor. I found that fitting really well to this topic around transforming our pain into purpose, and looking at what that koan that he brought, which is trauma being an unintegrated resource. And I totally agree on that. My understanding of trauma and emotional pain is that they are absolutely resources, and those resources are parts of ourselves that we have kind of become fractured away from our wholeness. And a lot of those wounds have to do with our childhood, having certain unmet needs. But then there's also collective wounds, and on some level, I'm coming to believe that the culture of the world as a whole is actually living in a collective trauma response. And this response is the kind of the terror of the collective pain of this experience of separation from the source, the source of our collective consciousness. Michael Meade, who's a mythologist that I respect, he talks about the first wound being when the soul enters the body at birth. It's that movement from that expansive field of the eternal realm to the density of the time and matter bound realm. So, just that in and of itself, this kind of sense of separation from source is painful. And I think on many levels, many of us are, having this experience of life where we're trying to get back to that feeling of connection, that sense of oneness. And we use many mechanisms to get there, but it's kind of perpetuated this existential pain that is almost like a myth of separation that pervades everything that we do as humans. And it's looking at nature as separate from the self. So as if we are not one in the same as nature, but it's something, nature is something that we often as humans, especially in our patriarchal culture, we're basically trying to dominate and control on some level. And that domination and control is also reflected in how we relate to ourselves, especially as men on a emotional level. Particularly as men, we've been conditioned to cut off from our emotional experience, which is also our embodied experience, because our emotions are occurring in our body. And ultimately, it's stemming from an assumption that the world is not a safe place. And many of us, I see this in a lot of men, is we end up living in this kind of perpetual state of anxiety because of this story that we're separate, the world is not safe. And so we're kind of in this posture of needing to protect ourselves from this supposedly unsafe world, and even kind of combat it. We're sort of in this posture of combat, like we need to fight to survive. And all of this is obviously there's some truth in it, right? We've evolved needing to survive on this planet evolutionarily, but most of us generally have our needs met, our basic needs for survival. So part of the integrative work that we can start to do is, number one, we need to sort of examine the stories that we are living under that are based in this trauma response or response to our pain or our fear of life itself. And the fact is, most of us don't really do that work. Most of us are not really willing to go into the pain, go into those uncomfortable feelings, because they're confronting. They have us need to examine the stories we've been telling about ourselves, stories we've been telling ourselves about ourselves our entire lives, as well as the world. So when we're living from our wounds, we're actually viewing the world through this lens that wound creates. So it's not necessarily a true view of reality. It's based on these kind of distortions that have us perceive the world through how we've been hurt, what we have come to expect because of what's occurred in the past. So essentially we're not really present in our lives most of the time. We're living in the past. We're living through what's occurred before, and until we slow down and stop the kind of habitual patterning of how we have a tendency to show up, and it's those moments of pause and reflection that we have an opportunity to have a new experience of our own internal reality and the external reality. So really the pathway from being trapped in the unconscious patterns of our wounds towards more of a mature experience of the world, where we have a different relationship to our pain, requires us to examine the wound and draw the lesson out that is within it, right? And traditionally, rites of passage were designed for this purpose. Like an initiation process in traditional cultures, we were put into circumstances where we were sort of forced to be with the discomfort and to look at the things that we didn't want to look at within ourselves, and on some level confront death, because really the greatest fear that is underneath every single other fear is the fear of death, the fear that we're not going to exist, right? That's what we've created this culture to protect ourselves from that possibility of death. We've created all the structures to protect ourselves from nature and all these threats. And so, with initiation, there's an opportunity to face that ultimate fear, that kind of trumps all of them. And in that process, we have an opportunity to create this new perspective, and there's a way of looking at the pain that we've experienced from a new lens, and from that new lens we can come to terms with the things life offers us. Even if we've been through traumatic experiences, we can rather than kind of living in a experience of feeling like a victim of our past, we can take ownership of it and draw out the value from it, right? And and that's really where the transformation from pain to purpose occurs, because there's an integration that happens when we're willing to really look at the things that are difficult, to be with the things that are difficult, and learn from them, accept them, feel them. There's a kind of alchemy that happens in that process, and from there we're able to really draw out the medicine. It's almost like in the problem is the solution, right? In the pain is the medicine for the pain, and so we can't really move around it if we're really going to heal it in a way. We have to go through it, and really the purpose of our pain is it's there to signal from the unconscious parts of us to our consciousness in a way to get our attention, and it's there, it's available to us to give us direction, because there's information there. There's information stored within those parts of us if we're willing to get familiar with them, if we're willing to get curious. And and so, I think the other ways that I see pain showing up as, in a purposeful way is it helps direct us towards having difficult conversations. It helps to show us, like, when we're out of integrity on some level in our life, it draws our attention to it if we're willing to listen to it. It's usually doesn't feel good when we're acting out of integrity. It brings attention to the parts of ourselves that we've neglected or abandoned. Helps us to see needs that are not being met. And all of these aspects of pain bringing our attention to something are actually trying to draw us on track with why we're here. They're all essential experiences that illuminate the places where we've kind of been sleepwalking through our lives and taking on these false identities that we've adopted as kind of survival mechanisms. And when we really dive in to this work of exploring the pain, it helps us to get underneath the ideas of who we think we are, so that we can really arrive at our true essence. Many of us kind of wear these masks through our lives, again, as like kind of protective mechanisms, because we're afraid to show up as the authentic version of ourselves. But when we are willing to, be with often these uncomfortable parts of us, that we may have at one point deemed unworthy of our love and attention, when we start to welcome them into our lives, we actually reclaim our wholeness. We get to become more fully who we are in our authentic expression of that being that we are. So looks like there's a question. I'm just going to check this before I continue on. Does this top apply to women? So I believe it most likely does, though I work
Soma,
specifically with men.
can you read the question aloud before you answer,
Oh,
please?
sure. Sorry, I didn't realize not everybody could see the question. So the question says, does this talk also apply to women? What is the difference between transforming pain into purpose for men versus women? Cool. So yeah, my response to that is I believe that it does. I believe there's a kind of a universal here. And my area of work is specifically with men, so it's a lot easier for me to speak to this through the kind of lens of masculinity and how I see it showing up in the lives of my clients and the men that I work with. So I don't, you kind of have to take what resonates with you and leave the rest if you're a woman and listening in. Yeah, I don't know exactly how the different experiences occur amongst genders, and I know there's a lot of blurred lines these days of how it gets expressed, but this is looking at specifically how men that I work with learn how to work with their pain in such a way that it can actually transform into something that serves their life rather than is a burden in some way. And that's it's often how I see men in particular experiencing, you know, their emotional pain, even their connection to their own bodies. You know, it's like I think a lot of more masculine spiritual traditions were this sort of disembodied approach, you know, where we deemed that these bodies were something that we needed to get over or get rid of, the feelings of, the impulses of, the desires of, in order to, you know, attain godliness or enlightenment. And in fact, what I find is that, you know, the pathway through the experience of the body is, it's been my experience that leads to the greatest sense of connection to spirituality, because it's based in this realm, right? And I'll get into a little bit later how there is value in some spiritual traditions that can create this distinction between like the sensational experience that's happening in the body and this kind of other aspect of our consciousness that is not this body, which actually I find creates a capacity to process some of the intensity that we need to move through in order to integrate trauma and some of our kind of embodied pain experiences. And I might even lead a little bit of a practice around that. Yeah. So I just want to speak to some of the common types of emotional pain. And, you know, the subject of pain is broad, you know, so I'm not going to touch on everything here, but it's important to, you know, especially these ones that I'm going to share, I think for men in particular are quite common. And it's, you know, I'm just touching on these points as a just a place to see what resonates and speaks to you, because it will potentially help to draw some awareness to things that are untouched. So there's a kind of pain that comes from like our unlived potential. As men in particular, I see this a lot. There's this, you know, we all have this yearning to be self-actualized, and that self-actualization, it's a lifelong process, and it doesn't really come easily, right? And so there's, you know, especially if we're not even on the path of moving in that direction, there's a lot of pain related to that. The pain connected to grief and loss, and that, you know, that loss could be loss of certain relationships, but it could also be the loss of years of an unlived life, you know, the sort of squandered time spent doing things that are unfulfilling. And a lot of men have grief in that area that is unexpressed, unacknowledged, and it sits with us. And I'll get into this a little bit more later, but really you know, in order to sort of move the needle away from having this lack of fulfillment, we need to be able to like process the past, process that grief, because it brings us here, it brings us into the now. And it's only in the now that we get the information of how to move forward more intentionally, and to really step into that self-actualization. So I also see a lot of men carrying the pain of shame, And this could be shame from around all kinds of stuff, things from the past, things that they've done, things that they've deemed unacceptable by social standards, shame of this idea of not being enough just for who they are. There's the pain of self-loathing that's also connected to that. The pain of isolation, loneliness, pain of unexpressed anger and other emotions as well. So these are all really prevalent, and because men in our society in general haven't felt welcomed to touch into this territory often. We haven't had the kind of safe containers. We've been conditioned to keep it together and to be stoic and to be unemotional so that we could function in certain ways in society. And so I think the reason I work with men in particular, and this is where I see a bit of a stronger difference in the genders, is around this socialization that says it's not okay for men to express certain things, right, or feel certain things, and so it creates an experience of suppression, and anytime we're not tapped into what we're feeling, we're actually cutting off a part of ourselves. We're disconnecting from some aspect of who we are, and the reason men can feel lost and uncertain of like their purpose, what they're here to do, is because they're not fully here. They're not fully with what's happening for themselves. We're never going to really have a sense of orientation until we start with like orienting around our personal experience, being with all of who we are in all of the content of this human experience that we've been through. And I want to speak to how these things that we don't touch in ourselves, like the pain that we experience over time, can manifest itself psychosomatically as symptoms through our physical bodies, right? That can manifest as disease, certain conditions, and there's often an emotional root cause to a lot of that stuff, and so it's really important for men to do this work so that it's not leading us down roads that are inevitably hurting our bodies, shortening our lifespan, all of that. So one thing that I see often, and I'm sure this translates over to women as well, is the avoidance of pain, right? And this is something that we're largely set up to do very easily in our modern lives, where we have so much kind of external stimuli available to us to in effect kind of desensitize us from our experience of what's happening, and to go into the pain, it's uncomfortable, right? And so most of us are comfort seeking in our lives, and that comfort that we're always seeking has an effect of numbing us to some degree. And what I'm speaking to is when we turn to external stimuli to kind of grant us temporary relief from our suffering. And this often comes in the form of some kind of consumption, be it food, alcohol, media, pornography, shopping. Can show up as workaholism, love addiction, anywhere we're seeking like external rewards or factors to make us feel better about ourselves. And these things in and of themselves are natural, normal. Most of them, there's nothing wrong with them per se, but it's when we're not bringing them into our life intentionally, we're kind of using them unconsciously in a way to disassociate from something that we don't want to experience. And over time it does kind of desensitize us, and it's the disadvantage to this is that we like I said earlier, we become kind of less available to experience life, including like the beautiful aspects of life. We sort of harden ourselves on some level because of these beliefs that it's not safe, or we're not safe, or we can't trust others. And so we living with those kind of internalized beliefs, we kind of are constantly escaping what's actually happening in the moment. And again, when we escape the moment, we're kind of escaping ourselves, which disconnects us from who we are and what we're here to do and what our purpose is. So I think I saw a question come through. I just want to check that. Take a little pause. How do you identify what needs to be healed? How does that healing start? Yeah, it's a good question. And so, I mean, I would say you can start by noticing the patterns in your life that seem to be reoccurring, especially in regards to relationships. Oftentimes, our childhood wounds will show up in our intimate relationships, and try to express themselves, because our wounds are often needs that were not met. They're unmet needs, and so these unmet needs show up in different areas of our lives, but in particular in our intimate relationships. And it, again, like the way to identify it is notice where there's pain happening. Notice where you are feeling some sense of dysfunction, like you're hitting a wall, like you're noticing this recurring thing that you've noticed in your previous relationships, and it's often pointing to something that needs to be addressed that's unconscious. And I'll get into a bit more about kind of the process of healing and what that looks like in a little bit. But I hope that helps to kind of point you into where to look. And it's one aspect, but definitely notice the patterns.
Soma, you had mentioned earlier that there's a practice that you use to help us feel our emotions better. You're about 2/3 on time, so I wanted to give you a reminder.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And yeah, I'm gonna go over one other thing, and then I'm gonna lead you guys through about 5 to 10 minute practice. So I'll keep an eye on the time. Thank you. And I'm just gonna check in with this other question that came through. I may not be able to answer it because I do want to get to a couple other things, but I'm just going to read it myself and see if I may just organically answer it in the rest of my presentation here. Yeah. Yeah, so this question came through, and I think it's really important and relevant, and I'm going to try to address it quickly because I think it shows up for a lot of men. So Rick Jansen brought the question, can you speak a little to the challenge that it can be for an adult man to individuate fully from one's mother? I experienced that as a 30-year-old man and wonder if it is common. Yeah, so it is common. And I think, you know, the psychological root of something like that is often like an enmeshment where the mother depends on the son for her sort of emotional stability on some level. And, you know, in the rites of passage and initiation that I spoke of earlier, you know, in traditional cultures, they would actually take the boys away from their mothers around puberty and take them out into, you know, a group of men, take them away for a period of time and kind of give them almost like a new birth through the experience of being in relationship to the masculine in a way. And unfortunately, we don't really get that as modern men often. And that's a big reason why I do the work that I do. And, you know, you can definitely try to self-initiate, and sometimes those self-initiations happen organically just through kind of a severance of the relationship where, you know, you determine like there's just a dysfunctional pattern here and I need to separate myself, and that's a conscious choice that you can make, and may need to make for a period of time. And you know, I would encourage you to read the book Iron John by Robert Bly, which is kind of a classic men's work, archetypal myth. And it, you know, there's a point in that story where the boy needs to kind of create that differentiation from his mother. And you know, I want to speak to this a little bit further because there's this pattern will show up often in if you're heterosexual and in an intimate relationship with a woman, you know, that we can kind of project our mother wound onto our intimate partners often. And often how that will show up is that failure to individuate is this need to always be pleasing or to sort of the kind of modern version of this is the nice guy. So this kind of persona that's not really being authentic, but showing up in such a way that he's trying to do whatever he can to never risk upsetting the woman that he's with. And part of our movement into maturity is really about living authentically as we are, right? And sometimes that means disappointing other people. Sometimes that means not tiptoeing around to make everybody happy. You know, there's a requirement to live our truth, to be who we are, and that's part of that individuation is owning our truth, owning like, hey, I'm gonna be who I am, even if you're pissed off at me. I can live with that kind of tension of you not liking who I am temporarily in order to honor exactly who I am. So I hope that's helpful, Rick. So I want to just speak to some of these elements of transformation that kind of shift this kind of being trapped in our wound or avoiding the wound with these kind of mechanisms I spoke of earlier. And I'll lead you through a little bit of a practice around this in a minute. But I just want to speak to them specifically so you get a sense of how you could work with them on your own. So wherever you're experiencing pain in your life, whether it's emotional pain or the tension of, not wanting to look at something, the first place to start is to start with presence. And presence is really just about connecting to what is, connecting to what's happening here in the moment. And from presence, we can move into acknowledgement. So acknowledgement is basically just the recognition that whatever's happening, it's here, and I'm able to welcome it for what it is, whatever it is, right? So there's a kind of a neutrality to it. Often we can live in this like good, bad, black, white, right, wrong idea of pain, and really we need to be able to show up to it with like a sense of neutrality, just to see it for what it is without judgment. And so that welcoming it is kind of being a yes to whatever is happening. And from there, we have the opportunity to feel it. So feeling it means we're opening to it, and there's often a threshold to feeling, right? And if there's a trauma that we've have pain around, you want to kind of lean into your edge around having that experience of feeling it. You don't want to just always dive right into the deep end and pushing yourself too hard, because that can kind of re-traumatize you. I mean, it's just like kind of in yoga, like a yoga practice. If any of you practice yoga, there's, you're not just gonna, if you haven't practiced yoga ever or in months, stretch to your fullest capacity. You're leaning into that edge, you're breathing into it, and you use the breath to kind of integrate the feeling. So yeah, and often we create more suffering by trying to escape our suffering. So like whatever we're resisting persists. So your presence and your acknowledgement and your willingness to feel it is this different relationship with it. And so you're learning how to be with the experience rather than running away from it. And then the next piece is around curiosity. So you want to be curious about what thing. And that could be from this observational perspective, but you can also start to, you can journal on this. You can get curious about what is this thing that I've been avoiding trying to teach me. You can dialogue with it. You can really seek to understand why it's happening, what it's there for, what is the lesson it's trying to teach you. And then from there, you can move into appreciating it, right? So if you've found yourself able to extract a lesson, you can move into gratitude for the gift or the wisdom it's offering you. And then, the final piece, and I think the appreciation is a form of integration, but really integrating it also requires you to kind of take that lesson, take that learning into your life and start to embody it, bring it into action. Another way you can do that, and this is how it shows up as purpose, is learning to then give it as a gift to the world. So you've learned something from it, and you can then have something valuable that you can share from that place. So yeah, so we got about 5 more minutes. Just checking in here. Yeah, okay, great. So hopefully that made sense. It's always interesting doing these presentations because I'm used to more interactive conversations. So I never know how well things are landing. So I want to lead you guys just through more of an experiential practice around this, and and so we're going to do a little bit of breath work, and I want to invite everybody to close your eyes. And ideally, if you're sitting in a chair or sitting on a cushion on the floor, that's great. You want to have a nice tall spine. If you're in a chair, it might be helpful to come forward to the edge of your chair and just notice what's happening for you right now in your body. Notice where your breath is right now. Just notice what came up for you during this discussion. Maybe some of what I spoke to resonated. Maybe it actually helped bring your attention to places in you that you've been avoiding feeling, avoiding experiencing. And so right now you can start to welcome those parts. And you can start to deepen your breath. And so just being a yes to whatever it is you're experiencing. And we're going to, just for a couple of minutes, start to amplify the breath a little bit. Because often when we're not allowing ourselves to feel something, our breath is kind of tight and contracted and withheld. So intentionally breathing more powerfully for a period of time, we have a chance to kind of integrate emotions that have been suppressed from the past. We get into parts of the body that have been kind of locked up and tight physically and energetically. So we're going to breathe through an open mouth. And you want to kind of relax the back of your throat. Emphasize the inhale. Exhale is going to be a little bit more relaxed. So it's going to sound a bit like this. So some force to the inhale. Exhale, you're kind of just letting go and releasing. So you want to feel your abdomen expanding on the inhale. You want to feel your ribs expanding out. You want to be breathing into the back of your body. And you might notice some kind of resistance, might feel a little uncomfortable, you might feel tightness, you might feel some kind of crunchy sensations. Just try to stay with it. Try to find that edge that I spoke of earlier. So find that edge, kind of meet that edge of resistance and kind of breathe a little bit through that. being a yes to whatever you're experiencing. This is your chance to really get into it. Yeah, and again, if you're noticing yourself feeling a little lightheaded and dizzy, that's normal. You might notice some kind of tingly sensations. You can back off a little bit. Just find your own personal edge. Take care of yourself, but try to meet that edge. Try to stretch yourself a little bit, but don't push yourself too hard or too far. We're going to go for another 30 seconds. Go ahead and do 3 more breaths. And on the 3rd breath, you're going to actually exhale. You're going to hold the breath out. And you're just going to, again, find your edge here. You're going to hold your breath out as long as you can. As you're sitting there, just tap into that stillness. It's at the center of your being. And notice what's happening in your body. Just observe it. Feel the part of you that's the physical experience of all the sensations that are happening in your body. And then feel the part of you that is consciousness itself. It's observing what's happening. If you need to inhale nice and deep and hold the breath at the top for about 10 seconds. Being with whatever's here. If you haven't inhaled already, go ahead and do that. And go ahead and let it go. Just notice what's different from how you started, how you feel now. We're gonna wrap it up. Really appreciate you guys tuning in here, and trusting me with that practice. And yeah, always welcome to further questions on this topic. I think all of my info will be posted in the conference website. So if you guys have some questions you want to throw at me via email, happy to respond in that way. Yeah, there's my website there.
Outstanding. Soma, thank you very much for that practice. I really liked it. What I felt in the after the practice was a strong sense of gratitude. And so thank you very much for that. And to
absolutely.
everyone, thank you again, Soma. To everyone, please drop your comments into the chat. Yeah, we've got some applause. Drop your comments. We've put the link in there for you to connect with Soma. And we also want to invite everyone to continue the conversation and connect with us. We've got the coffee rooms that you can join us, and our Facebook page on which you can join us again. and also this session, along with every other session that I've been able to enjoy on this conference, is amazing. And every session is posted for 48 hours, so you can take it in again and really digest the information. And for those of us who want to fully digest the information, get the conference. We've got the conference available by channel, and we've also got the entire library available so that you can go between channels and watch and digest at your convenience and really internalize everything. But I want to note to everybody, if you're getting the conference, price doubles after today. So now's the time. Soma, again, thank you for this feeling of gratitude that I have. And I would like to bring everything around back to you and ask if you would close us out with giving us your number one tip to live embodied.
Yeah, sounds good. So my number one tip to live embodied, I would say it's all about the breath. If you're conscious of your breath, you're going to be more in your body than, again, speaking to men in particular, and I think this is somewhat universal. We can live so much in our heads and our thoughts, and so if you want to live more embodied, start breathing deeper, fuller, more consistently. Bring your awareness to your breath throughout the day.
Outstanding. Thank you again, Soma. Everyone, please continue the conversation with us. Our next session on this channel will be embodying social change individually and collectively. Thank you again, everyone. Thank you, Soma. And thank you, Julie.
All right. Take care, everybody.